Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. This is a class to benefit Eve University. I'm Amoni Panala. You may know me as Zipporah Panala or Camille Panala, depending on when you met me, if you met me at Eve University. So, today we are going to talk about Sovnull, or more technically, sovereign null security space. So we're going to talk about what Sovnull is, how it differs from NPC null. We'll talk about sovereignty and the structures that make up sovereignty. We'll talk about ADM, or Activity Defense Multiplier. We'll talk about sovereignty warfare. And then we'll talk about the Equinox expansion and how that is anticipated to change the way that Sovnull works. I debated whether to actually even make this because of the changes, but I figure that because they are slow rolling the changes on the Equinox expansion, people will have uh, a certain amount of time to implement the changes um, to their space, that there will be some early adopters who uh, accept the changes right away as soon as they're available with the Equinox expansion, and they'll be able to play around and experiment with it. And then there will be people who are going to wait, and they will learn about how it all works from the mistakes that other people make. So let's dig into this. So, Sovnull is sovereign null security space. Most people just call it Sovnull, and I will just call it Sovnull moving forward. It is a region of null security space that your alliance can claim ownership over. Sovnull is different from NPC null in a number of different ways, but some of the more noticeable ones is that Sovnull gets unique mechanics. So there are a few different structures that will always be in Sovnull. There's going to be a territorial claim unit. There's going to be an infrastructure hub. There's going to be an encounter surveillance system. And you have a strong chance of seeing supercarriers and titans in Sovnull. Now, if you're just filamenting into random Sovnull, or you jump out of a random uh, wormhole into Sovnull, you probably won't see a supercarrier or a titan. But if you spend any length of time in Sovnull, um, either as participating in something like John Bellicose Day or something like that, you will see supercarriers and titans, and we'll talk about why it is that you will only see those in Sovnull. In NPC Null, it is impossible to fully evict people who live there. Um, NPC Null has NPC stations, which are indestructible. And essentially, if people live there, even if you destroy all the player-owned structures, even if you destroy all the citadels, all the bosses, all that stuff, they could still live out of the NPC structures if they had to. May not be very fun for them, but they could do it. In Sovnull, it is absolutely possible and definitely happens that you can evict people from the space. And so those are the primary differences. There's lots of little things, and it'll become more clear as I explain some of these unique mechanics, but we'll get into it. So, sovereignty comes with its own structures, and I'm not going to talk about the ESS, or Encounter Surveillance System, because one, it's kind of it's whatever. Like, it's a thing that exists in Sovnull. It's a bank. Okay, it's a bank. When you crab in Sovnull, it um, it takes it takes your money and puts it in the bank, and people can rob it. Okay, there, encounter surveillance system. The reason I'm not getting into it is because it's a thing that most people are familiar with, even if you don't live in Sovnull, because it's a very popular thing to filament into random Sovnull systems and uh, rob those ESS banks. So I don't want to get into it too much. Now, the two things I want to focus on are the territorial control unit. Now, it sounds important, but it's actually just basically a space flagpole. It doesn't really do anything other than like it shows the alliance who owns it when you go into the system. So if you ever go into a system and you see that there's a different alliance that owns the territorial control unit, and somebody else owns the infrastructure hub, it's because nobody gives a single rat's rear end about the territorial control unit. Is I don't know. I mean, whatever. It's whatever. The infrastructure hub, however, is what is used to actually claim ownership of a system. Um, when you have an infrastructure hub, you are the owner of that system, and you can upgrade the infrastructure hub with a bunch of different things. I've given a list of some of them. There's a few more, um, but these are the ones that are like extremely common to find. So the first one is the Advanced Logistics Network, and it allows you to build Ansiblexes, which are basically just Stargates that players own and control. There's the Sinusoidal Navigation, which allows you to build a permanent sinusoidal beacon. Um, you can also upgrade it to have a sinusoidal suppression, which allows you to build a permanent sinojammer. It also allows you to online the super capital stand-up module for structures. So this allows you to build super carriers and titans. Super carriers. Okay, so this is weird. Super carriers are technically not like they don't have their own distinct category when you look at the ship tree. However, you cannot build these things outside of Sovnull, and you can't dock them in anything other than a keepstar. And the most common place to find a keepstar is going to be in Sovnull. So even though these carriers are technically they're not considered different in terms of the ship tree. They're not considered different than any of the other carriers, but they are most definitely different. They cost a heck of a lot more too. Um, and you can also build Titans. So, you know, Titans are cool, I guess. I mean, okay, they are cool. They're pretty cool, but you know, whatever. Um, you can also upgrade the infrastructure hub with an ore prospecting array, which allows you to spawn ore sites. And it's upgradable from 1 to 5. When you've upgraded it to 5, it's improving the quality of the ore sites. So, um, if you go into a system and you notice that that system consistently has high quality ore sites, that's probably because it has an ore prospecting array. The other one is the pirate detection array, which allows you to spawn combat anomalies, and you can upgrade that as well from level 1 to level 5. Um, and this is why whenever you're in a nullsec, a Sovnull system, you will see that there are just a metric ton of these combat anomalies. And it's because they have that pirate detection array. Um, this is why NPC null does not get a lot of sites, or at least it gets the right amount for not having any sort of thing that you can activate to spawn more, right? So, PC9 can get a little crowded sometimes. The whole pocket can get a little crowded sometimes. If you get too many people crabbing, um, those sites disappear fast, and then you get people kind of grumpy about the fact that they can't crab or whatever. Um, Sovnull solves that by having an upgrade to the infrastructure hub, which you know is cool. It's super handy. Um, you'll never run out of combat anomalies. Maybe you'll run out of the ones that you want to run, the specific ones that you want to run, but you'll never run out of combat anomalies. So now the other half of this is the ADM, or Activity Defense Multiplier. It consists of three pieces, right? So there's the strategic index, the military index, and the industry index. The strategic index increases. You basically have to level these up, right, by doing certain things. Well, the strategic index levels up um, the longer you own that system. So you own it for a while, boom, you got your strategic index up. Hooray. The military index is increased by crabbing. So there is a strategic benefit to having people crab in all your systems, or as many of them as you can safely do. Um, but crabbing increases the military index. The industrial index, or industry index, I'm now realizing I called it industrial index in the presentation, but it's actually industry index. It increases with the amount of mining one does in the system, and that's by volume of ore. So if you're mining really inefficiently, or you're trolling and you're using C-type crystals, right? Um, the industry index is not going to increase because it's based on the volume of ore that you've mined. ADM increases the overall defensive capacity of the system, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to sovereignty warfare. But as you can see in my screenshot here, the strategic, military, and industry indices are all at max, and the activity defense multiplier is 6.0. So we're going to talk about what that means now. So to claim a system in Sovnull, the you have to connect to the infrastructure. It could be the infrastructure hub or the TCU, but generally you're going to go for the iHub. And you use an entosis link, right? So for most members of Eve University, you're never going to touch an entosis link because we don't hold Sov, and we are expressly forbidden from participating in sovereignty warfare um, by the rules of engagement. But a few of you may have participated in um, the project discovery events that required you to use an intosis link. So you might have there's a number of you who might have played around with an intosis link for that. Colloquially, using an intosis link is called toasting, which is how I will refer to it moving forward because it's so much easier to say. Um, to use an intosis link, you need Infomorph Psychology 2 for the T1 version, which is going to be on ships like, you could put it on like a T1 hauling ship, right? So just like, you got a sigil or whatever. Um, Infomorph Psychology 4 allows you to use the T2 intosis link, and with the T2 intosis link, what you're doing is you're decreasing the cycle time of the module, um, which, okay, um, but it's slightly better. Um, you do have to have stront or strontium clathates. I don't know if I'm saying that other word correctly, but you need stront. It's a material that goes into a bunch of different policies use them, and intosis links use them. Uh, there's a couple other things that use them, and I can't think of what they are right now. I think caps use them, but most Eve University folks don't use caps, so probably the only time you're going to encounter them is if you encounter a POS. One of the things that you might do um, is you might hear someone talk about whether it has stront, because stront is used to power um, basically power the reinforcement timer or the reinforcement thing. But you need stront for intosis. You need it to toast. So unlike citadels, sovereignty structures have vulnerability windows or periods of time in which toasting is possible. So your um, your iHub is going to have a vulnerability window, and when you enter Sovnull, you can see it. It's not like a super secret or anything. Um, it'll say like next vulnerability window, and then it'll give you a time. And so this is very different from the way that citadels work, right? Where citadels, you can hit it at any time you want, but then when it enters reinforcement, um, it comes out of reinforcement at a specific time, and that's when you have to hit it, uh, and you have to hit it hard enough to either pause the timer or just blow through the next timer, right? Like through the armor or the hull, whatever the case may be. Um, so citadels can be hit anytime. Sovereignty structures, on the other hand, can only be hit in that window of time. This means that it is possible to time zone tank more so than you could with citadels. So it's fairly common practice um, to set your structures, your citadel structures, your upwell structures. Um, you'll set the reinforcement timer to a time zone or a time that is ideal for your corp or your alliance, when you are most likely to have the largest number of people online. And you kind of want to set it like right in the middle of that time because it can be plus or minus 3 hours. But with sovereignty structures, you're hitting it, or you're toasting it, I should say. You're toasting it um, within that vulnerability window, and toasters are just going to be brick tank ships, right? You can use you can use an industrial for like if this is not a system you're anticipating any resistance, or maybe just like a flycatcher shows up or whatever, like whatever, um, you don't really have to worry about it. So you can use like a T1 hauler, right? A sigil or whatever. Um, that's great. For the more spicy, the more contested uh, instances of toasting, you're going to want something like a brick tanked. You might want like a brick tanked. Something like a brick tanked a Boucher or a brick tanked cruiser or something like that. Um, but the important thing to keep in mind is that depending on what the ADM is, right, the activity defense multiplier, you're the amount of time that you're going to spend toasting is 10 minutes base times the ADM of the system. So in my example that I showed you earlier, the ADM was 6. So that's 10 times 6, so that's 60 minutes. So you've got to toast for an hour, right? That's quite a bit of time. And that and so when I say that ADM, as your ADM increases, so does your overall defensive capacity for that system. It is a lot easier to respond to a iHub being toasted if you have 60 minutes as opposed to 10 minutes, right? Like 10 minutes is like everybody get in interceptors and go. Like burn, 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 you rage ping, you go. But ideally, if it's that important to you, you're not leaving it at the base 10 minutes, right? Once toasting is complete, it goes into reinforcement for 48 hours. And then there's going to be 5 command nodes that spawn across the system. You can warp directly to them and entosis them or toast them, right? Um, when you toast these command nodes, they become captured, um, and I believe it's six. They start at 60%, and you got to get them down to 0 as an attacker. If they get to 100%, the defenders win. So Um, if the attackers win the command node phase, the sovereignty structure blows up. And the attackers can then put their own sovereignty structures up. If the defenders win the command node phase, the sovereignty structure goes into invulnerable mode. And so it's, you know, you kind of you shoot your shot, but if you don't succeed, that's kind of it's game over. You got to pack up and try again some other time. Um, so Equinox, um, oops, Equinox is going to change Sovnull. Now there are going to be some core elements that are going to remain the same, right? But there's also a number of things that are changing, right? So in some ways this is going to be a dramatic change, and in other ways it's going to be much the same. The first is that there's going to be a new structure called the Sovereignty Hub, and this is going to replace the TCU and the iHub, and it will be upgradable. There will be new materials unique to Sovnull. The first is called Power, which is harvested from the sun and you cannot share it across systems. It's locked to that system. Work is the sort of power or the sort of like quantity generated by the workforce represented by the number of people on hand doing the work that you need them to do to keep your sovereignty structure up and running. The other one is reagents. This is this is fairly adjacent to like PI, but it is not PI, not strictly speaking. It is unique to Sovnull. And you use it to upgrade and upkeep the Sov hub. Um, the other new structure is the Skyhook, which is how you get reagents. Um, this one is only available in Sovnull. It replaces Pocos and provides those additional resources, specifically reagents. Skyhooks can be looted. I'm not entirely clear on how the mechanics work. If it's you've got to reinforce it, and then you can pop the storage container that holds your resources. Um, I'm a little fuzzy on that. They tried to explain it, and I'm not totally clear on how that works. They also said that not all of it is set in stone, so some things could change between when CCP talked about it on their stream and when Equinox actually releases, but we'll see. Um, the other new structure is the Metanox moon mining drill or Metanox mining drill. I'm not sure which it is, but it is an automated moon mining drill, which essentially means it's passive mining. You don't need to do anything once you got it up and running. Um, according to CCP, it will be inefficient. So it's not intended to replace mining in your mining ships entirely. What it's intended to do is allow you to not worry about mining that low tier crap that spawns in every system. It is meant to take the burden off of miners who are, seeing all this garbage ore, this garbage moon goo, and thinking, I don't want to mine that. That stuff's not worth much. Well, you put a Metanox mining drill on that moon, and it'll mine it for you. The Metanox mining drill is actually available in low-sec null-sec, which includes Sovnull or NPC space, and it's available in wormhole space. Now, if you've seen my analysis videos, you know I talked about how the Metanox mining drill requires Sovnull specific resources. Specifically, I believe it requires reagents to build and keep running. So it's kind of an open question. Is it worth it for folks to import these materials to low-sec, NPC null-sec, and wormhole space? It's an open question. We don't know yet. I think if the moon mining is bad, if it's so inefficient that it costs more to upkeep for people outside of Sovnull, I don't think it's going to get used very much. If it is good enough that it's actually worth that it pays for itself in the amount of moon goo that it mines, like great, then I could see plenty of low sec, null sec, and wormhole space folks using it. I could even see people putting one up specifically because it can generate content, right? So the Metanox moon mining drill, supposedly, if you reinforce it, you can then pop the storage unit and out comes the moon goo. So I don't know, potentially you could get a bunch of Care Bears to come out and fight you, allegedly, or maybe the Care Bears will bat phone somebody and you can bait out a fight that way. Like, Equinox is very much like introducing new elements of space work, as my alliance mates will say, which just means that there's a lot of busy work that you actually have to do in game to keep everything running. So it's going to increase that space work. However, it also looks like the whole intention is to create more opportunities to bait out fights, to provoke fights, which was the whole point of the ESS, right? It's very fun and thematic to rob banks, right? Um, and the whole point of it doesn't make people a ton of money. Like an individual who gets lucky can probably make some good money robbing ESS banks, but like whatever. This I can't see people making a ton of money off of this unless you're like mining some really really nice, unless you rob like a really really nice moon of its ore. But they shouldn't be using Metanox moon mining drills on it anyways. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I am concerned that people will just be, the ping will go out that Metanox moon mining drill is being hit. People will just say, meh, whatever. So we'll see. We'll see. But those are the changes that are going to come. The Sovereignty Hub replacing the TCU and the iHub sounds good. Like, I got to keep this Unicoms because this is an Eve University class, but like, screw the TCU and iHub. It's a silly, silly, silly thing. A Sovereignty Hub having it one structure makes a lot of sense. I'm I'm excited about the new resources and the potential for interesting things to happen managing your space, and managing your resources and thinking strategically about where you are drawing the most resources and how you're managing them. Um, so that sounds interesting. Um, Mostly probably interesting because I don't have to do anything. I just get to watch it happen and listen to people whine and complain if it sucks. So um, we'll see. But there is no live class on this video, um, so there's nobody going to ask questions. But if you have questions, you can leave them as a comment on this video. Otherwise, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends who are curious about the differences between Sovnull and MPC null and want to understand how Sovnull works. I realize that there are some little things, some little nuances that I didn't go into. I promise you, it's fine. You got the gist of it. This is the introductory course. If you want to come out to nullsec, out into Sovnull, and you want to fly around with me, then we can talk about the more nuanced details. But until then, I wish you all the best. Fly safe, everybody.